Hello, everyone. I'm Jim McIntyre, the Regional Communications Director for the American Red Cross of Northern Ohio. And nearly 1 month ago, devastating rains ravaged eastern Kentucky. In the aftermath of that flooding, the American Red Cross has worked closely with partners to provide emergency shelter, food, water, relief supplies, emotional support, and health services to people in need. Early on, Red Cross volunteers deployed to eastern Kentucky to help the people affected by these floods. One of those volunteers was Bob Crum, and he was the subject of a news story on Fox 8. That's Bob. Now, the news story.
Well, catastrophic flooding continues in Kentucky. Tonight, dozens of Ohio search and recovery teams and volunteers are heading into the danger zone to help save lives. Fox 8's Suzanne Stratford joining us now with the story from the newsroom. Suzanne?
Yeah, good evening, Elizabeth. The situation really is devastating in Kentucky right now and has Ohio now tripling efforts to help out by deploying more than 45 specialized water recovery team members and American Red Cross volunteers.
A wide range of possibilities when we get down there.
Dozens of rescuers with Ohio Task Force 1 are mobilized Friday night, heading to eastern and southeastern Kentucky, joining fellow team members who are already there helping with search and recovery efforts.
Anything you can imagine that we've been involved in as far as rescuing people from houses, from roofs, from inside buildings, to assisting people that just need basically move from one area to the other.
Flash flooding has swallowed entire towns, claiming at least 16 lives so far, say Kentucky officials, with hundreds rescued from rooftops and pulled from the rising floodwaters.
Came down so hard and so fast, that's why you probably got all the water, had nowhere to go.
Displacing entire communities.
We're trying to respond to help people that are in need.
Veteran Northeast Ohio American Red Cross volunteers, including Bob Crum, are heading down early Saturday morning.
To help with opening up and providing sheltering for individuals that have been forced to leave their homes. We'll be setting up in facilities that could well be middle schools or high school gymnasiums.
Providing food, cots, and support for victims who've lost everything.
The damage from floodwaters is just horrendous. Instantaneous. The water may remain in place for several days.
On Friday, President Joe Biden signed a disaster declaration, which will free up federal funding for recovery efforts, which Bob says
can take years, decades to repair and for people to recover.
Bob and fellow volunteers are deploying for 2 weeks right now, but he says prepared to stay as long as necessary.
There are already some Red Cross people and people from other organizations on site at this moment. We're continuing to gear up and staff up to meet the needs of everyone.
Well, catastrophic flooding continues.
Bob is one of the disaster volunteers who did help us in shelters in Kentucky, eastern Kentucky, helped provide people a safe place to stay. And as of right now, we've provided more than 11,000 overnight stays in shelters for nearly 1,000 residents, 8 new shelter registrations just overnight last night, and we're a month out from that devastating flooding. But it's not just sheltering that the Red Cross provided for the people of Kentucky. With the help of partners, a total of nearly 112,000 meals and snacks have been provided. And among the volunteers who are helping provide those meals and snacks are Arden Tohill and Irwin, who are joining us now to talk about their experiences. Arden and Al, thanks for being with us. I'm glad you returned safely. Tell us about your experience. Arden, you were behind the wheel of that emergency response vehicle when it pulled out of the parking lot at the Akron chapter headquarters. So tell me what happened when you got to Kentucky.
Well, we, after a slight delay, got our assignment, and within a couple of days we were feeding people, going out on designated routes, and we had stopped first at the kitchen, loaded up the food containers or Cambros with hot food, and then drove out to our designated areas and started dishing up meals to the people there.
So you were driving through neighborhoods, through areas that had been affected by these floodwaters?
We were doing that some. We were also doing fixed site feedings where we would set up at a convenient location for the people and then dish up the meals there.
What kind of damage did you witness?
It was horrendous. One of the first towns that we visited had a bunch of bobcats, small tractors with front end scoops, just scooping up shovels full of mud and getting it off the streets and away from homes and businesses. And a lot of water damage all over the place. Cars in streams and rivers. Some homes just totally obliterated.
I can't imagine what those people are going through, the people who needed the assistance that you and Al and the other volunteers, more than a dozen of them from northern Ohio, were able to provide to them. Is there any particular experience that stands out to you? You've been deployed several times. This is just the most recent one. Is there anything that stands out to you?
Well, one thing that since the standing water.
Well, Arden's breaking up on us a little bit, and we lost Al's video feed. So we'll try to get them back. But in the meantime, how about I show you a photo of the two? That's what they looked like when they left Akron just 2 days after that storm hit Kentucky and ravaged the countryside in eastern Kentucky. We're broadcasting on Facebook right now. And if you have a question for Arden or Al or any of our other volunteers we're about to introduce you to, then please, Al's back now. Feel free to put your questions on Facebook in the notifications, and we'll do the best we can to answer them during the broadcast. Al, Arden was telling us about his experience. What about you? You were with him the whole time?
I was with him the whole time.
Okay, so you've got your battle worn now. You're battle ready. You're battle tested. Tell me, what was your experience like?
Well, number one, it was a good experience. It was a good deployment. It started off when we drove the Irv from Ohio to Kentucky, and then upon arrival, we kind of had to sit around for a little bit because things were still being organized. Many roads were still flooded. We couldn't get into areas that we needed to go to. But after, I don't know, the first day and a half, 2 days or so, we finally got routes and we got out into the affected areas. And I didn't hear what Arden said. I lost connections and had to now on my phone instead of my tablet. But we got to see some pretty damaged areas. I just can't believe how floodwaters could tear up a town so bad that, I was just in Kentucky a few months ago for the tornado, and the one town that was hit by the rainwaters and everything, it looked as bad as the town did in the tornado. It was really bad.
Was this the same area, Al,
No,
that was hit by the tornado?
it was not the same area, the opposite side of the state.
I see. Nonetheless, the folks in that state must be pretty weather weary.
Yeah, when it started to rain the second or third day we were there, then we just thought to ourselves, man, these people, I don't know what they're thinking, but it can't be good. The rains were starting to come in, and one place that we were feeding, the Rangers came in. We were feeding at a state park. It was a state-run shelter, and we were feeding there, and the Rangers came in and says, okay, we need to wrap it up. We need to move out because we're expecting the roads to flood out, and if you don't leave, you're going to be trapped here. And then subsequent days, we changed routes, but subsequent routes going to that area, they had to take their feeding stuff in on a boat to get to the shelter to feed. So that's how bad it was.
Can you imagine there are still hundreds of people in shelters a month later?
I can't imagine that at all.
But you did the best you could to provide as comfortable conditions as you could, I'm sure.
Well, we did our best. One of the main things that we could do is we could listen to them. They needed to tell their stories. They needed
Right.
to vent, and we could be good listeners.
How many times have you deployed now, Al?
I don't know, 10 times.
You ready to go again?
Absolutely.
Another volunteer who has deployed several times and whose camera isn't working right now, so we're going to try to bring Mahogany Coward in here so we can hear her story. Actually, I don't even see Mahogany. Oh yeah, here we go. Stand by. I'm going to put her picture on the screen. Mahogany,
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
the floor is yours. You were providing logistics support, correct?
Yes, it was my gap for this time was called logistics facilities. And let me explain a little bit about that. So, when we have a national disaster or even a local disaster, when we're talking about our clients and talking about the community, we got to have somewhere for them to go. So this time I actually got to see the exciting part of how the Red Cross goes in and makes the agreements with the facilities. That could be the local Y, that could be a church, that could possibly even be facilities that a mayor may open up. I found that a lot of the mayors own hotels in Kentucky. And so they were able to provide. It's more of a paperwork meetup type of situation, and walking around and seeing if the facility would be available to us for our clients, possibly even a staff shelter for us volunteers and employees for Red Cross. So day to day, instead of me actually sitting in a shelter facility and taking care of the clients, which I love to do, I love to hear their stories and see them. I did visit some shelters, but again, it was mainly concerning the agreements. Like, for instance, since I do logistics here in Stark County, we would need a facility to house all of our equipment for warehousing. So I actually got to talk to individuals there in Kentucky, locals, to find out whether or not we could use their facility as a warehouse. And that was very exciting to see because, again, you're sitting down, you're explaining, again, what the need is. Now, I'm going to say this about Kentucky. They're a wonderful state. I have traveled not everywhere, but a few states. And I really like how Kentucky, again, I know they had the tornado, but they were ready. Jim, they were really ready. Some things they had already tackled. But when you do the logistics facilities, it's more of how long would you need this facility? 2 weeks, a month, 30 days? What access do we have? Uh, can we have access for wheelchair individuals or clients to come in? Is there steps? Can we be able to use the shower? Clients have to take a shower. So the staff, we have wonderful accessibility where we can bring trailers in to access shower needs. Of course, we have our herbs that provide food, blankets, care kits. Those all come. But on the facility side, you wouldn't believe, Jim, what I seen and what I was able to understand. And I do have other classes that I'm going to have to take to go along with it. But this was a new gap for me.
Now, explain gap. What do you mean?
Okay, so a gap is actually when you decide to become a volunteer or an employee on the Red Cross side, and you sign up and you say that you actually want to participate in a local or a national disaster. You have to take trainings, and the trainings will get you ready and prepared for what we have in our. I use Volunteer Connection, and so I started with sheltering. Sheltering will be implemented after the classes that I've taken, and you can go up to certain levels. I start always as an SA, which is a shelter assistant, and then you can go up to being a shelter supervisor, and then you can go up to being a shelter manager. But you have to take the classes first. So with the logistics facilities, I was a shelter assistant, which would be SA under the terminology under my volunteer connection, where I go and sign up to, of course, do the disaster. I have to put my hours in, but that just gives you a little information. You do start at the bare basics, whether you're volunteering. And so I
Mahogany,
started off, yes, sir.
does the training cost anything?
No. And let me shout that. I want to shout that. No. None of
Okay.
our trainings
All right.
cost
Great.
you anything.
Thanks, Mahogany. We'll come back to you in just a moment. But first, I want to bring a couple of people on who are not volunteers, but they did volunteer to travel to Kentucky to represent the Red Cross. Mike Parks, the regional CEO of the Northern Ohio region, and Todd James, the executive director of the North Central Ohio chapter. Mike and Todd, thank you for being with us, and thanks for deploying to Kentucky. Mike, you were among the first to go, weren't you?
Well, Jim, I first want to just thank the wonderful volunteers that you've already had on. It's just so inspirational to hear their comments and hear their commitment and passion. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Todd James, who, people don't know Todd, but if they don't, when they get into his office, there's a map of the United States with push pins at all the places that he's deployed. And I'm starting to have trouble determining which states are which because there's so many push pins. Todd has been to, he's one of those guys that always runs towards the fire. So Todd, thank you for your efforts. Really,
thank you.
Really appreciate it. And, when I was actually in a meeting, Jim, with a board member when my boss called, and I was like, well, this can't be good. I mean, he doesn't just call me in 4 o'clock in the afternoon to see how I'm doing. And long story short, he said, we need you in Kentucky. And so, 2 hours later, I was on my way driving to Kentucky. And it's interesting because earlier in the morning, I'd heard him talking with a disaster professional about what was going on in Kentucky. And he gave me a quick brief about all the stuff that was going on. I thought, wow, that's bad. And I didn't know that 8 hours later, that bad would be my future. And so, but like has been said, you get down there and you see all the damage and the devastation and the people who are helping each other. Kentucky is a special place and it's got some unique challenges, but it was really a privilege to go down there and try to just help keep things moving and keep the operation on track.
What exactly did you do? I don't imagine you were in shelters or driving around in an herb feeding people.
No, although I've done that in the past, and that's certainly very rewarding. One of my responsibilities was to help make sure all the elected officials in the area were properly briefed, so they knew what was happening to their constituents, and we were connecting to them to find out if they had any information, because sometimes they knew better than we did of where there were pockets of need. So we would use that network, that elected officials liaison network, to try to help identify needs and be able to respond to them and make sure that we're caring for the constituents, which are our clients through and through.
Todd, you're a public affairs manager. What does that mean?
Well, in this deployment and a lot of the deployments I go out on in that role, what I'm doing is overseeing our public affairs team, and that's the team whose job it is to get information out to the area that's been affected, so they know what services are available to them, where to find help, and also to tell the story of what's going on. You know, it is the generous donations of a whole lot of people across the country who let us do this work when we go out on these disaster responses, and they want to know how the Red Cross is utilizing their generosity to help people. So we go out and we tell the story of what's being done. We talk with the folks that are being helped. Had the opportunity to talk with a lot of the partners that we work with. There are so many organizations that respond in an event like this, and really in any disaster. And we work together to help the folks that have been affected, and had a chance to meet and talk with some of those great partners, and tell some of the stories, you know, the feel good stories that sometimes can get lost. But a real quick one, just as I was leaving the operation, one of the things we were working on, there was a gentleman who was staying in one of our shelters, and he was a rather large gentleman. He wore a size 23 shoe. And size
Wow.
23 shoes are not easy to find. And someone in the community had heard about his need to have footwear. She owned a shoewear store, but a footwear store, but didn't have anything that size. Made some calls on her own, was able to secure a donation of a pair of shoes that would fit. Reached out to us to say, "Can you connect me with this gentleman?" We were able to connect them, so he would have a pair of shoes, and drove them down and delivered them, so he'd have a pair of shoes to wear. Which, little things like that may seem commonplace to you and me, but when you've lost everything in a flood or a fire or a tornado, you know, just having your own toothbrush or a place to sleep or your own pair of shoes that fit can mean everything, and especially in an instance like this.
You made quite a few videos while you were there trying to tell the Red Cross story and the story of the people who were affected by those floods. Did you run into others while you were out in the field?
I did. I met a lot of the folks from the area down there that had been affected, and it's hard. I was back in that same area about a year and a half ago. You might remember that they had major flooding in that same area back in March of 2021. And then a year and a half later, I get the call to go back. So I really feel for that area because they've been hit twice hard now, and this time was just devastating. So many lives lost. Entire communities were wiped out by this flood. Small communities where everybody knows everybody, and businesses and homes and everything just gone. And it's going to take so long for them to rebuild. And we met so many great folks. I think as Al and some of the other folks said, that you know, they were all so nice. They're friendly, even in the midst of this tragedy. And the volunteers that are there from all over the country, and even those from the local area who have been affected, who have family members that have been affected, but are less worried about themselves right now and more worried about helping their neighbors and their friends recover. So met so many great people. It's always kind of bittersweet leaving. You know, you're glad to get home, and it's nice to sleep in your own bed again. But at the same time, it's like I really wish I could stay longer and be here till the end. Unfortunately, the end is a long way away. Recovery is going to be a long process, and I know the Red Cross and the teams are going to be there for a very long time helping with that.
I'm going to bring the volunteers back on, Arden and Al, and well, Mahogany, at least for voice. Uh, just to say thank you for deploying, for doing what you did, and to ask you the same question. I think I asked either Al or Arden earlier. Are you ready to go again? Because not only, as Todd mentioned, is it a long way away from the people who were affected by these floods in Kentucky being made whole again, but there's some activity brewing in the Caribbean, I understand. It is hurricane season after all. Um, you guys have your bags packed still?
Suitcase always ready.
Yep.
Oh, always
Yep.
ready. What?
Mine's all set.
How do you say that in Latin? Always ready. Not sure.
Semper Paratus.
Uh, yes, I've heard that before. That's the motto of the United States Coast Guard. And Admiral Parks, a retired Rear Admiral from the Coast Guard, would know all about that and is always ready. You know, you are among the 767 disaster workers who have been deployed to eastern Kentucky in less than a month. Now, you have returned, but many more remain on the scene right now, helping hundreds of people who are still in need. So, if you have it in your heart to donate to disaster relief, to help the Red Cross respond to disasters like the floods in Kentucky, like the home fires that happen more than 3 times every 24 hours in northern Ohio, feel free to visit redcross.org and make a donation, or text the words Red Cross to 90999 to make a $10 donation. Mike, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, I'll just say thank you, Jim, for hosting this great opportunity on Facebook Live. I really appreciate you using your immense talents to bring us together and help us tell not really our story, but their story, the people that we're serving down in Kentucky and obviously in other places. There were just 15 inches of rain in Dallas last night. This happens all over the country, and there are Red Cross people everywhere. And our job is to help those people in need and to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. There just seem to be a never-ending supply of emergencies, but it's people like this on this call who have done so much and continue to do so much. So thank you for highlighting that, Jim, and thank you to everybody who's out there. Stay safe.
If you'd like to be like Arden and Al and Mahogany, you can go to redcross.org/volunteer today and take the training that Mahogany described, the free training that will prepare you to be able to help people like those at Eastern Kentucky, those in the Dallas-Fort Worth area who are dealing with flooding now, those in California and along the West Coast with the wildfires and with the inevitable hurricanes that will be coming barreling up to our coastline. So redcross.org/volunteer today. Thank you all for being with us on this broadcast.